Hello, everybody. This is Mastodon Comics and Collecting. It is a nice sunny day here in central Pennsylvania, the end of February, and I decided to do a contest entry for Comics with Bueller. I wanted to do this entry because Bueller got me into comic books, or into the community, I guess, for lack of a better way of say it. He was my gateway into the community. I first started watching his videos, and through him and being introduced to the Comic Corps, I was introduced to a whole new world and element of this wonderful community that we belong to. I was going to do this as a regular video, but I wanted to be able to share my screen because I wanted to play that little video clip at the beginning, and I couldn't figure out how to do it otherwise. But the reason for that video clip was because that is kind of where my story starts. My origin story is what Bueller is asking. He wants to know your origin story as it pertains to comic books. And I'm going to go even further as it pertains to getting into the YouTube comic book community, and I'll give you the brief origin behind my channel name. But the Ames Ames department store was a local department store chain to the Pennsylvania and I guess Northeast Atlantic coast area. They bought the Hills franchise, Zellers, and so forth. The Big N was a big chain in the 60s and 70s. But Ames is where my family shopped. It was our Walmart, basically, our Kmart. And then we had a Kmart as well, which that plays into the story as well. But Ames was the main place that my mom would get our clothes and stuff as a kid. Some of my first CDs were bought at Ames's. But we had a local comic shop at the time, but I really didn't know about it until my senior year, which unfortunately was probably about a year before it went out of business. But my story, as far as comic book, starts in the Ames. We were there. It was probably mid-late 92. And I just happened to be in the office supply section. I think we were might have been looking for notebooks or something for school. And I peered down and I saw these bagged books. And this was one of them. They were X-Force books, X-Force issues 5, 6, 7, and 15. Why they split the run, I don't know. But the reason that enticed me was, because of the cartoon. The XMen cartoon was a big impact on my childhood. And the cartoon led me to get this book. It is the Marvel X-Men Guidebook by Dwight John Zimmerman. I know I've showed this book before. There wasn't a time when I was a kid where this wasn't in my possession. I had it in school. Probably got caught with it several times, but as you can see, it's fallen apart. You open it up and there's a beautiful, it's the cover. I don't know. I'm thinking that's Jim Lee, but I'm not sure. The contents, some Professor X drawings, Juggernaut, and it tells the whole story. Character bios and things like that. Storm, Jean Grey, and Iceman. And at the time, it split the teams up by the blue and gold. Gambit. I traced several of these pictures at one point when I was a kid. And I didn't do too bad a job tracing, if I might say so. Hello, Pages. How are you, sir? Thanks for joining me. But it breaks into the other teams. Extra Teams was the chapter. And it started out with Excalibur, X Factor, which I read quite a few books, X Factor books when I was a kid. And X-Force. So knowing about these teams and knowing about them and not really realizing anything really about comic books, being 10 at the time. And I was like, oh, what do we have here? What's this? And I picked the books up, and I was looking at them, and I turned to my mom and I said, "Can I get these?" And she looked at me for a minute. She said, "Well, you're listening, you're being haved." So, and I had a tendency to wander off. And on that occasion, I didn't wander off. So it was kind of a reward for not being mischievous. I got these books. And I believe there was a couple other ones later that I got. One of them had the New Warriors issue that I had shown previously and talked about. Issue 46, I believe it is. But anyway, this is where my story starts. This is the first comic book I read. Now, I had another comic book, Jughead's Time Police book issue, but I never read that. I read that years later, and it kind of sucks. But this is the first book I read, and I made it a point when I met Fabian Nicieza that I was going to get this signed. I also got issue 15 signed by him, as well as Greg Capullo and the editor at the time. I can't think of what his name is right now. But anyway, and when I told Fabian that this was the first book I ever read, he said, "Oh, I'm so sorry," because he did not like the story at all, I guess, that's kind of unfortunate, but it is what it is, right? Moving on, I continued collecting comic books as a kid, though my collection never got very large. JCPenney's had these kits that you could buy, and my parents got them for me two Christmases in a row. And you got 10 or 20 comic books, I can't remember which. plus bags and boards and a storage box and these heavy plastic bags. I guess maybe a precursor to Mylar. I don't know. They're very rigid, and I wouldn't suggest putting your books in them now, especially now, because it could damage them. But at the time, it was purposeful. They served their purpose. So I got those 2 years in a row. There was a lot of classic X-Men in there, and some X-Force and some X-Factor and stuff like that. And they also, it got me reading. So my parents were very hip to the cause, we'll say. They were glad to see me have an interest like that. And it was also a reward for doing well in school. If I was having some good days in school with grades and stuff, I would get a comic book. And when I was younger, like first, second grade, they used that method, but with Matchbox cars. I kept getting good grades. I get a Matchbox car or two. Well, that continued with comic books. And then my collection, continuing on as far as that, my dad picked up a box full of Weird War Tales and Sergeant Fury books. And I mean, they well loved. They're mostly in rough condition, but I loved them. I read them, enjoyed them very well, and I have been working on completing both runs in the process. As time went on, I got involved in sports, so I sort of drifted away from comic books and reading comic books. There really wasn't time. As I got to college, I would pick up the odd collected edition. I started collecting the essentials, the Marvel essentials, and they were all black and white, but it gave me a chance to read the stories, which that was great for anybody that was getting into comics and just wanted to read the stories. They were perfect for that. But as far as being collectible and adding to the art, they're mostly Xeroxed, so the art itself is not really there. But if you just want to read the stories, the essentials were good for that. And they were cheaper than buying, say, the Masterworks. But now I would suggest the Marvel Essentials. And DC has something like that, I believe. But they pump the trades out like crazy now, especially with the newer stories, and which is great. I'm starting to think just doing trades is probably the way to go. Just put a completed story arc out every couple of months. Because the single issues, unless you're putting out the variant covers, which everybody seems to go after, a few years go by, and I get this ad on my Facebook 2011, 2012, 13, somewhere in there, for this subscription service called Comic Bento. And it's a mystery box of trades from various publishers. And in a way, that's kind of what got me back into comics. And I had that for probably a year and a half, maybe 2 years. And we had to cut some expenses, tighten our belts on things. And I quit it, but I got into a lot of the Image titles, a lot of the indie titles I got into that way. And then about 2016, right before a Rebirth came out, and Dark Knight 3 was coming out, and I said, you know what? I definitely missed the boat on Dark Knight Returns. And the sequel to it. So I'm gonna pick this one up in single issues. And I started out with this place called Baltimore Comics, and for some reason or another, they stopped updating their page or whatever. I don't know if they went out or what. But I decided, I'm going to go up to the closest shop to me, which, little known to me, was in the middle of transitioning ownership, but it had been a shop locally owned for a long time, called America's Most Wanted, and it transitioned to the Comic Shop LLC. And I developed a rapport with the guys that are my age, and picked up a pull list. Eventually, that shop, through various reasons, would close, and the shop around the corner is now basically my LCS. But I started going to cons in 2017. A fella I work with, incidentally, is my brother-in-law's cousin, also has collected comics for a long time. And he was telling me about a local con down the road, about an hour and a half from here. So we hit that one up. That was the first one we went to. Just a smaller con. And I met Mr. Williamson from the original Inglorious Bastards, Fred Williamson. A great guy. I walked up to him, shook his hand. I said, it's a pleasure to meet you. And the wife and kids were, being distractive. So I didn't get the chance. I wanted to talk to him a little more, but I didn't get to. And it was a fun time, good time. We ended up going to a local con in Pittsburgh called Steel City Con, and had a lot of fun there. I met Pinhead from Hellraiser. Very, very cool guy. Got my picture taken with him, and Lou Ferrigno, Michael Rooker. I mean, that is a con that's all about, the celebrities. And I went to East Coast Comic Con with the intention of meeting Mike Grell, and I ended up meeting so many other ones: Larry Lieber, Marv Wolfman, Fabian Nicieza, and that was a phenomenal experience. very overwhelming. Old Danny Trejo was there. I met him. And that fall, no, it was a year later. 2018, my LCS had folded, and I was looking for, I don't know what I was looking for. But we went to Baltimore, and when I got home from Baltimore, I started snooping around videos. I wanted to see if anybody caught me on camera. I was being silly. But also I wanted to see if there's anything on YouTube in regards to that kind of stuff. Because I had done that before. I'd looked at other videos from other cons that we were at just to see what other people got. And that was when I was introduced to comics with Bueller. And he was doing some really cool videos. And I just fell over the comics, coffee, and comments videos. That was my favorite video that Bueller was doing, and it's Bueller opened us up to, or me up to, a larger world. I had no idea that people were on here doing videos, and I guess if I had been looking at stuff like that a lot sooner, maybe I'd have been in it a lot sooner. But I was making videos and uploading them I had started in about August, and because I was in Facebook groups, and I'd seen other people were showing books, showing their pickups and stuff like that. So I started doing that. Well, my phone started getting full of videos, and I was like, well, I don't want to lose these. Oh, I have a YouTube account. I'll throw them up on YouTube. So I did that, and then I had come across, or I started watching Bueller's Friday night live stream, and he said, come over to Comic Core channel. We do a fun Friday night live stream, and so I went and checked that out. And my introduction into the comic community just kind of blew up. I started talking to people in the chat, and just having a lot of fun. And they don't so much anymore. But they used to drop a link in the chat to come hang out afterwards in an off air. And it wasn't the first night, it was a couple shows later. I clicked the link. And here I am talking to these guys that, in my mind, you know, they're on YouTube. YouTube, you get this mindset that, oh, these guys are celebrities, and I've talked to them about it, and they're just down to earth. You know, and we're all small community members, and that was my introduction. And I continued doing videos and watching videos, and I thought I'd try to live stream, and I had trouble with it the first time. And I get a call via Facebook Messenger from Bueller, and he said, "Here, I'll walk you through it." So the big shout out, big thank you to Bueller for helping me out with my first live stream. And several months, a year and a half later, I'm still doing live streams. I've figured things out. Streamyard is a great tool to use. Hangouts was great, but you know that they get rid of that on us. But I started thinking, I don't want to just be Don Moss. Everybody knows me as Donnie, which is cool. But I don't just want my channel to be Don Mosser, It kind of becomes like a company. So I messaged Bueller and I said, what's your opinion? I'm thinking about this, and we ended up on a call again, and he gave various suggestions. And that's where I come up with Mastodon Comics and Collecting. Now, the story behind Mastodon is it really doesn't have anything to do with the band Mastodon or any Frank Frazetta stuff or anything like that. Although I am a big fan of Mastodon. Great band, great music. I love it. A guy I used to work with gave me that nickname. Called me Mastodon. So I had various ideas because I have an infinite number of nicknames that I could have chosen. But for some reason, that one stuck up. And I was going to go with Mastodon Inc. And Bueller suggested, if you're going to make a comic channel, put comics in the title. So that's where we come up with Mastodon Comics and Collecting, because the collecting, I don't just collect comic books. And that was cool for quite a while. And then the new rules and all that stuff, I decided I was going to back off of comics and just be the Mastodon. Just go with all the other stuff that I do. I started doing the reviews, the music reviews, the movie reviews. Just kind of as a way to filter out what could possibly be an issue with the COPPA, which, as I've seen so far, there hasn't been any issues. We must be too small for them to even bother with. So that's my origin story. That brings us basically up to date. From a little department store in central Pennsylvania called Ames to still a little town in central Pennsylvania, just basically making some videos. When I answer pages, when I began collecting, again during the year 2017, Bueller's channel was one of the first I subscribed to. Him and We Love Comics. Yeah, Chris is a good guy. There's a lot of people that disagree with him, but everybody disagrees with everybody. There's not always an agreement on every front. But Chris is a good guy. He's had issues in the past, unfortunately, but yeah, Metarog's been around for quite a while. Metarog's a good guy. Farley's Nerd Cave. I like the videos that Farley does with the vinyl. Love that. All right, Pages. Thanks for joining me. But there you have it. There's the origin of the Mastodon. I want to shout out Bueller's contest. There's a link in the description below. And I also want to shout out a new guy that I've been introduced to, Bears Rockin' Comics. He does these videos he calls comic bags. And I'm assuming they're the stuff, it's the stuff he gets in the mail. But he's over in Ireland, I want to say, but I'm not sure. I haven't had as much communication with him as far as that goes. But I put a link for his channel in the description. Again, his name is Bears Rockin' Comics. He's a good guy. Check out some of his videos. He's, when I looked this morning, I think he's about 117 subs. So sub him up. Again, check out Bueller's contest. If it's still running, I don't know if it's still running. Metarog's got the hook on that. I want to thank everybody for watching. Thank Pages for coming in and chatting it up a little bit. And as always, keep collecting, keep reading, and keep sharing. Later.